And thank you to Ms. Lamkin and the other officials for coming in to us today. I just want to go back to your opening statement, if I might, for a moment. You talked about poor investment and management decisions, and you stated that while the authority is not the only development body to have been impacted by the recent property downturn, as an organisation we have paid a heavy price. How is this viewed in the authority today? Is this viewed as a bad investment decision at the wrong time?
Deputy, to confirm again, the authority had an objective to secure the coordinated development of the Poolbeg area, and that had Section 25, or was looking at putting Section 25 planning in that area to ensure the continued physical and economic regeneration of that site, and that would have been an objective set out since 1997. However, the purchase of the Irish Glass Bottle site has affected all of our operations, and you'd have seen that in the CNAG report. And as the Deputy Nash referred to earlier, our cuts in spending in relation to social regeneration, that purchase has resulted in us having to scale back our operations. The authority has a staff of 15 people now, which is down from a high of 55, and it is the total cost of the Irish Glass Bottle site transaction to the authority was €52 million. That money would have otherwise been invested in the regeneration of the Docklands project.
My point is, do you view it as a poor investment decision, which has left you in this financial position, or do you view it as something worse, given what we now know?
I think the authority...
Conflicts of interests, for example, the exposure that was meant to be limited that wasn't, the executive not giving enough information to the board at key meetings, things like that.
Deputy, as I mentioned in my opening statement, there were serious errors of judgment around the investment decision to get involved in the Irish Glass Bottle site.
Is that about the timing and the price paid, or does it refer to the other aspects of the deal?
I suppose what we say is it was the right ambition to get involved in the Poolbeg planning scheme area. However, it was the wrong price, it was the wrong time, and there were serious errors in the process to purchase the site.
Okay. Ms. Lamkin, how long have you been at the authority?
I have worked at the Docklands Authority since 2003.
Were you senior management?
I was on the senior management team, yes.
Okay. And what discussions did you have with Paul Maloney before he approached Mr. McNamara?
I was in the capacity of Director of Marketing at the time, and I wouldn't have any knowledge of such projects as they would have been outside my field of...
But it is your understanding that Mr. Maloney approached Mr. McNamara first?
I wouldn't have any awareness of that.
It is detailed in minutes, actually, from the 3rd of October, where the Chief Executive did brief the board that he had had confidential negotiations undertaken with the developer, and the developer confirmed that he would welcome the involvement of the authority jointly in a tender. So it is known that Mr. Maloney approached Mr. McNamara.
Yes, it is, and that is recorded in the minutes where, in that meeting of the 3rd of October, the board discussed issues around development partners at the time.
So Mr. Maloney went to McNamara on behalf of the authority, but he didn't seek permission from the board before he did that. Is that correct?
The minutes of the issue of development partner was discussed at the board meetings of the 3rd of October, and they would be the records I would be referring to in this matter.
That's when Mr. Maloney told the board that he had spoken to Mr. McNamara, but he didn't receive sanction from the board to approach Mr. McNamara directly.
I wouldn't have the information, Deputy Murphy.
Before you go to board meetings, what kind of preparation would you undertake with the Chief Executive?
The practice, just to explain to you, at the time of the management and board, we would prepare board papers on specific projects, and those papers for smaller and larger projects would outline backgrounds to the projects, the kind of positives and negatives, any risks to the authority. We would present papers also to seek approval of funding for projects to the board. There would generally be a discussion among management around different papers. However, our remit and our function was to bring our expertise to bearing on our functional area. And in my capacity as Director of Marketing, I would be providing marketing and communications advice to the management and board of the authority.
Would there be a kind of a pre-briefing before you went into the board and a debriefing as to how the meeting went from the management's perspective?
Yes, there would have been a post-board meeting, obviously, where we would take actions from that board meeting to decide or to actually action whatever recommendations have been made at board meetings.
So you would have then had a chat, say, for example, before the meeting of the 3rd of October, Mr. Maloney would have gone through and said, well, today's meeting I'm going to tell everyone that I approached Mr. McNamara to see if we could get involved with his bid for the glass bottle site. Would that have happened?
Deputy, I wouldn't be aware. I didn't actually attend all of the board meetings, particularly where there were areas outside of my functional area.
You attended most of them, though?
Pardon?
You attended most of them in relation to the glass bottle site?
Where
it was brought up at the board?
There were a number of meetings around the glass bottle site where the decision was made to purchase the site, and I believe I attended one of those meetings.
Okay, well, sorry, the record I have has you at 4 out of 6 meetings on the glass bottle site.
There would have been subsequent decisions at board meetings where I would have attended the board meeting where we would have been discussing a number of different topics at those meetings, and yes, I would have attended those meetings.
And again, then, before you went into those meetings, it would have been discussed what was happening in relation to that site in the group you were having in the pre-briefing.
Yes, Deputy, I confirm that we would have a pre-board discussion around different areas, but I would point out that there was we had various different functions there, and I would have been representing my function and would not have had any direct involvement in that particular project.
But you were senior management at the authority, so there is a collective responsibility on senior management for what the authority is doing. And this was a pretty big deal. Actually, I think it's the largest property deal ever done in the history of the state. Do you not think it might have been incumbent upon you as senior management to have taken more of an interest at the time?
Deputy, I was there to bring my expertise to bearing in the marketing communications function. As I mentioned also earlier, an objective of the authority had been set down to get involved in the pool PAC area to apply our Section 25 process since then. So our jobs management team was to ensure the delivery of the Docklands master plan, and I would perform my role in delivering that plan alongside the rest of the management team.
As senior management, do you not accept that there is a responsibility there for you, having been there, privy to discussions with the Chief Executive, Mr. Maloney, before and after important board meetings where very serious decisions were taken by the board?
Deputy, I'm not here to defend, I suppose, my own role in the Dublin Docklands Development Authority, or to justify as to why the transaction or the authority sought to take an interest in this particular transaction, and I really wouldn't be able to comment on it any further.
You are acting CEO and you were there at the time, and you are here to answer for the authority. And I'm trying to understand the culture at the time around the executive and the board. Did you ever think that Mr. Maloney was withholding information from the board in relation to any of the activities of the authority?
Deputy, my experience of the management team and the CEO is they carried out their roles in a professional manner. I wouldn't be able to comment any further on that matter.
But you are aware that reports into the authority's workings did conclude that Mr. Maloney was not fully informing the board of the activities within the organisation?
Deputy, I believe in the governance reviews that were undertaken in the past, the chairman, Professor Lee Brennan, pointed out that there was not full information on some matters being communicated to the board, and I would confirm that. However, the governance reviews those reviews took place in 2010, and the authority has applied those learnings over the past couple of years, and we operate a robust system of process and procedures to ensure that there is comprehensive communications between the management and the board.
But were you aware at the time, with your involvement, or did you have any concerns that Mr. Maloney was not fully informing the board of activities in the authority? Say, for example, in relation to salary rises for CEOs that weren't approved by ministers when they should have been?
I wouldn't have been aware of the matter at the time. Subsequently, the King report pointed out a number of governance failures, and the authority has since put in place procedures to ensure that those governance failures are addressed.
Did Mr. Maloney tell you when he had engaged in discussions then, or when the authority had engaged in discussions with Anglo-Irish Bank and Bank of Ireland?
Deputy, I wouldn't have been privy to the conversations around those matters, so I wouldn't be able to comment on that.
Does it strike you as odd that members of the board of the authority, including its chairman, would have been aware that the authority was in negotiations with Anglo-Irish Bank and Bank of Ireland before the actual board knew itself?
Deputy, I wouldn't have any awareness of what people would have known or not known at the time, so I wouldn't be able to comment on that.
No, I just asked if it struck you as odd that your senior management in the executive, you're at many of these board meetings, and at the 24th of October board meeting, the chairman stands up, or sorry, stand up, he sits there and says, well, in fact, the bank we were talking to, we're no longer talking to, we're talking to Anglo-Irish and Bank of Ireland. And that's the latest. Did that strike you as odd, given that the chairman was a member of the board of Anglo at the time when you were there?
Deputy, I wasn't in attendance at that particular meeting, so I couldn't comment on that.
Sorry, but it came up again on the 2nd of November as well, when it was confirmed that Anglo would be the bank to go with.
And Deputy, I would point out that on the 2nd of November, the board members did in fact discuss the matter of conflict of interest and did excuse themselves from the meeting when there were discussions around specific bank financing for the transaction.
But did it strike you as odd, is my question?
Deputy, it wouldn't have been an area, I wouldn't be in a position to comment, I would have been an area that I would have an informed opinion on at the time.
Okay. I think it's odd. And in fact, Niamh Brennan thought it was very odd when she came in, and I know that you consulted A&L, was it A&L Goodbody's for your legal advice as to whether or not there was a conflict of interest?
That's correct.
Well, it seems they got it wrong, but Niamh Brennan said when she came into one of the Oireachtas committees previously in relation to this whole event around the bank loans and the board meetings, that it is absolutely clear that there were systematic conflicts of interest between the authority and Anglo-Irish Bank by virtue of those common directors. There are questions about whether, as directors of the authority, the individuals in question owed their duties solely to the good of the authority, or whether the authority was engaging in transactions influenced by their outside interests. Was anyone in the management team at this time talking at all about that conflict of interest?
Deputy, as I noted before, it was a matter of discussion at the board meetings. Management would have attended those meetings as well, and the authority complies with code of conduct, which would have been a matter of much discussion during those meetings from 2005 onwards and to today, where I mentioned earlier that we have put in place a new governance suite as of 2010 to make sure that we have a very robust approach to dealing with all of those issues.
We're dealing with something that occurred 6 years ago, and we don't have the CEO from the time, but we do have a senior member of the management team. We know that there were serious conflict of issues that arose at the time. These don't seem to be recognised by the management team at all.
Deputy, it was a mistake in our view, and I think again you quoted Professor Niamh Brennan earlier, and again she remarked, I believe, at the same committee that having board members on the board of the authority, but also the board of various different banks, it didn't serve the authority well. So in hindsight, it was a mistake. There were errors in judgment and decision making as a result.
I accept it was a mistake. I think everyone knows it was a mistake. But I'm trying to get insight into what the management team was thinking at the time, what it was discussing, or if it was discussing it at all. Was this solo run by one person in the management team?
Deputy, I'm not here, I suppose, to apportion a responsibility to any particular member of the management team. There was, to the best of my knowledge at the time, there was a code of conduct in place, and it was the duty of every board member and the management team to comply with that code of conduct. And to the best of my knowledge, all members were complying with that code.
Are you happy that the corporate governance rules in place now in the authority are robust and are up to standard and would protect the authority from, potentially such a future decision or a future conflict arising?
Yes, Deputy, we have a very comprehensive governance suite which is in compliance with the Code of Practice for State Bodies. We've been fortunate to have Professor Niamh Brennan, who is a governance expert recognised across the country, as our chairman for the past couple of years. So I would be confident.
And about the 15 people who are still with the authority, were they all there in place, or, for example, has anyone been recruited in from outside to the authority?
Typically, we had 55 staff in 2008, and we now have 15. So they would have all been recruited prior to 2008. Like all other state agents, we are affected by the moratorium on expiry of contracts. So we've not been recruiting people over the last couple of years. There are a number of contracts affected by the moratorium, so those contracts will expire over the next year or so. But there is no recruitment currently allowed.
But did Professor Brennan make any changes when she came in to the executive?
Yes, a number of members of the executive would have left on the expiry of their contracts.
Okay. And then those new positions would have been advertised?
Those positions were not filled due to the sanction imposed by the moratorium on expiry of contracts.
Okay. If I might just, Mr. John Crow, you're the financial person with the authority. And who was the person previous to you?
A gentleman, David Higgins.
David Higgins. And when did he leave?
I believe that was March 2010.
And then you took his place, is that correct?
I didn't directly take his place. I'm an external consultant.
Okay. And you're still employed as an external consultant to the authority?
Correct.
Okay. Are there many other consultants employed by the authority?
We would have a number of consultancy services that we buy in across planning, valuations, quantity surveying, and finance.